Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. And welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, your moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have, as always, a great webinar on tap today, but before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to listen to it on demand. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And we'll take a few minutes near the end of today's webinar to go through the audience questions. And finally, we are giving away we're going to have a drawing to give away 3 $50 Amazon gift cards at the end of today's webinar. So stick around and we'll be doing that drawing near the end. So good luck and hopefully you'll be one of our winners. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Consuming DevOps, How Upstream DevOps Initiatives Disrupted Our Downstream Consumers. Our speaker today is Bryan Cole, who is ADM Practice Manager at Microfocus. Bryan, so great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Cheers. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk about kind of the downstream ramifications of DevOps, the stuff that isn't necessarily talked about terribly often when you are considering a DevOps transformation. I am the ADM Practice Manager for the Americas, so I am responsible for making sure all of our field sales and pre-sales organizations have all the tools, training, and enablement they need. And the DevOps transformation we went on forced me to do a lot of things differently. So let's talk briefly about that. Microfocus has been on a journey of DevOps transformation internally for many years now. This really started manifesting itself in 2016 for the first time. It was sort of the first warning signs that we didn't understand what was about to happen to us. So way back in the past, in 2012, we had a software portfolio consisting of maybe 10 major products, and they would release roughly every 18 months. I mean, our release cadence was so reliable, and we had customers who were using our software for such a long period of time that they really began planning around that into the future, understanding they could contact us 6 months ahead of time and say, hey, you've got a release coming up in roughly 6 months. What do I need to know about it so I can properly plan for upgrades if I have things like a database dependency that would need to also be modified, things like that. But by 2017, not only was our software portfolio over 3 times larger through mergers and acquisitions, the number of releases had also increased by a factor of 6 or more. Instead of having a release every 18 months or so, we were now moving to a quarterly release cadence for many of our software products at the slow end. Others were moving substantially faster than that. The scope of the releases, while they did get a little bit smaller, did not get substantially smaller. So the velocity that we were experiencing went up dramatically. Instead of the quantity and quality of releases arriving into the sales, marketing, and enablement teams, it just kept getting faster and faster. And in 2016, we started noticing this wobble. By 2017, our world was starting to become really problematic. So this presentation is not about our R&D DevOps transformation. Now, DevOps is great. We've had a really successful internal transformation. We've reaped all those benefits. Everyone always wants to talk about, increased velocity, quality, increased customer satisfaction, decreased cost. It's great. I encourage you all to do it, but you're here on DevOps.com. You probably already know DevOps is great. The content that we're actually going to be talking about is everyone downstream from R&D and how their internal transformation dramatically changed our lives as the consumers of this, regardless of how we felt about that. They really didn't seek our permission ahead of time, which is just as well, because it's only been a positive thing for everybody. So first and foremost, the most obvious downstream consumer are customers. At Microfocus, we are a software vendor. We sell this software to customers, and they get business value from it. That's great. These represent companies everywhere from a few dozen employees to many, if not all, of the Fortune 500. And we have thousands upon thousands of customers. The general feedback over the years was, we want more releases of better quality at a faster rate. Great. That's what DevOps can provide, and that's what we did. We started our DevOps transformation, and we were initially applauded for our efforts. But DevOps is a journey, it's not a destination. There isn't a point your reach when you say, great, we're done, we're going to stop trying to do any more on this path. So we continue to accelerate our pace of software delivery. And the message from our customer base changed from one of joy at faster releases to essentially basically, please stop overwhelming us with software releases. Many of our customers manage very large teams of dozens or hundreds of end users, sometimes even thousands, working on mission-critical software for their organization. The idea of performing a system upgrade during such a time when they would need to invest time and effort internally to perform the upgrade, they would often suffer downstream dependencies, such as those database versions that also needed to be upgraded or other platform support. They'd need to begin then investing in training and enablement for all those hundreds or thousands of users. And many of those users would be non-technical, non-IT, they're business domain experts who are just leveraging our software to accomplish their job function, all while potentially jeopardizing these major projects. They're just not going to do that. This is the mission critical software that runs the large financial organizations or the healthcare industry or airlines. There's a lot of risk involved in making changes in the middle of a project stream. Going from a 18-month schedule that worked pretty reliably where they could plan for these things to every quarter totally disrupted that. And there's an entirely separate presentation on how we're listening to that feedback and identifying why that's risky. I'm happy to talk about that as well, but that's not what this presentation's about. However, customers generally are now planning their upgrades based on features they need. So they can absolutely come in and say, that's great, I love this new release, but no thanks, we're not going to install that one, we'll wait. This is a really fabulous change for our customer community. They are now allowed to think about it in terms of the content they want to consume, not based on constraints that they're facing, like versions of a Microsoft or Oracle database or any of the other kind of dependencies that they might have trying to install enterprise software. So we can offer multiple versions of our software every year that fully support any of the platforms they're currently running, and giving them a tremendous amount of that flexibility back into their hands. So this gets them the freedom to choose the version and the time frame when performing upgrades without any other additional environmental pressures or minimizing the scope of those because we're changing so incrementally so quickly. So that's well and good for customers. But for internal teams, particularly marketing, technical enablement, and the pre-sales organization, of which I am a part, foregoing the use of the current version of our software is we can't just take this customer tag and say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We have to do product demonstrations that showcase the latest version of our software. We have to have current marketing collateral that aligns to the current version of our software. We can't have old, outdated versions of this stuff published on our website, for example. And we have to train our people. We have to do the technical enablement so that we understand what software is being released out to our customer base. We can't say no thanks. This is what I'm going to talk about in today's presentation. This is the major axis of what we're going to be covering today. So historically, way back in 2012, which isn't actually that long ago, but in IT land, that's hugely in the past, our internal process kind of went a little something like this. So prior to the release, we would have the marketing teams, as software moved from development into QA, reaching out to the R&D organization to learn what exactly was coming into the release, to gain access to those QA versions of the software packages so that they could get screenshots and other collateral they needed to create marketing materials. Then they would spend a bunch of time polishing it and assembling it into good content and get that all aligned with the release date, and they had lots of time to plan for this. So the release date arrives and we published all of that marketing content at the same time. And it was very well aligned and everything was good. The technical enablement teams did something similar, gaining that insight into the software release in order to build training and enablement sessions and training for other consumers like the pre-sales organization, like our professional services organizations and so on. And this was great. Again, they had time to look at that, but they couldn't just use the QA versions because there were often, defects. That's the point of QA, and we get those remediated so that we release our software so that it just works flawlessly, as it always does, and make sure that we basically train on the stuff that's actually going to the customer base. So they would wait until the actual release date and then assemble the training together. So until that product cycle was finished, no demo environments could be constructed. The demo platforms themselves, the stuff that the pre-sales teams use to go out and show our customers this is what we now have, they needed to be constructed as well. And they were entirely assembled by hand. There was no automation in this process. And the entire process took quite a bit of time. There are various software dependencies and unanticipated interactions. If you read our installation guides, we're quite forthright saying you shouldn't install these two products together. They do conflict. And in a real enterprise, you would never do this anyway. But in a demo environment, we're trying to jam a lot of enterprise software solutions all into the same virtual machine. So there were occasional issues and things that we needed to resolve and make sure that we could tweak and tune so that it just worked properly. This led to a lot of time. It basically, we're wanted to make sure that we got everything working, but it took a while for us to figure this all out. And historically, we were all pretty happy about this. It worked really well. So well, in fact, that the entire organizational structure that we built up was built around hardening this process in place. In 2012, this was a well understood process. We understood what we were doing. We knew the cadence of software delivery. We knew what was going to be coming down the line. Marketing engaged with R&D 4 to 6 weeks before the release. They had a good lead time to create all the content. They did a good job keeping up with the releases. The content they created was polished. It was accurate. It was useful to our customer base. The enablement teams generally ran technical awareness webinars maybe 2 or 3 weeks after a release, when they had time to understand all the features and make sure they could construct an environment to show those off. And at the same time, as the owner of the demo platforms, they would then construct a new version of our demo environment, package it up as a virtual machine, and push it to essentially an internal FTP site where everybody on the pre-sales team could go and pull it down. That generally took them about 4 to 6 weeks after a release. So that meant for the pre-sales team, again, which I'm a part of, on the day of a software release, we often receive no enablement or no demo system for weeks after a release. And many pre-sales, myself included, would either disregard the release as minor. We just wouldn't show the difference between, version 9.51 and 9.52. There's not enough in there to justify the work of resetting my demo environment, or we would do upgrades on our own, or we would just wait for the next version of the demo platform to be published and pull that down, toss away the one we had, and use the new one going forward. But this variation on the action that the pre-sales community took led to a vast increase in the inconsistency of demo assets within the pre-sales community. We started to see a lot of drift of what specific version of the demo platform was somebody using, and what did they do to it, and how was it different, and if I did my own upgrades, what did that do to my system versus somebody else's? It was really hard to kind of triage errors that were occurring in the demo platforms themselves because they were all so unique from one another. And generally, we were all pretty happy, and it worked, and our customers were pretty happy. They were on this 18 to 24-month release cadence, and they said, this is great. We know you just had a new release. We're planning our upgrades. Come on in, and they would do that, 2 months after a release cycle because they knew that's a good time, and we'd all be prepared. So what happened? Why did this whole world implode on us? And fundamentally, it's because R&D did this. Instead of having a few handful of releases, it really got going in 2016. That's really when the first warning signs were there. We didn't understand what was happening, but this really streamlined in 2017 as our DevOps transformation really kicked into high gear. And suddenly there was no respite at all in the lead time. Software releases were happening to a particular solution every quarter, and in some cases faster, even at a monthly cadence. The volume of products eliminated any ability to spend 4 to 6 weeks gathering information for marketing materials. The marketing teams just started to fall behind. It could not keep up. Additionally, waiting for enablement and demo platforms under the old model would mean we could very easily fail to deliver ever within the time frame of a release, entirely missing a release, so that by the time they finally delivered a demo platform, not only was the version of software in there out of date, but the entire next release had already happened past the one that made it out of date. It was a big problem for us trying to deal with this. In a desperate effort to keep up, velocity was increased directly at the expense of quality. Any of that time spent trying to finagle and understand how jamming all these systems that were not supposed to be installed together and figuring out those dependencies, all of that was removed in an effort just to install it and ship it. No checks, no validations. And our demo environments began to kind of crack under that strain. This had a really deleterious effect on the pre-sales teams going out to try and talk about this, because our platforms started to become much more unreliable. So at the same team, the marketing teams were falling further behind and trying to keep up with that torrent of new features and software products arriving all the time. So our collateral started getting weaker. From a pre-sales perspective, this combination of demo platforms are getting a little rocky, the content's starting to not be as good. What do we need to do? We have to be able to adapt and change faster. This perfect storm of something has to give came together for us, all together at the same time. So change we did, and in ways we did not imagine. This also happened at the same time as this whole Microfocus spin merge that occurred in the industry. So the size of our and scope of our demo environments also were dramatically increasing at the same time. There were a lot of downstream problems that all came together all at once. So the major change that we made is we had to reinvent and completely rethink what a demo platform needed to be by really focusing on the core requirements and letting go of any concept of how we did things in the past and just starting over from a clean slate. It's really hard to understand all of the assumptions that we had been making about what a demo platform needed to be and how it needed to be structured. The most interesting outcome from my perspective on this was that one of the key drivers for this transformation was the fact that essentially we implemented a DevOps transformation all on our own. We were starting to see DevOps content and materials coming out of marketing. We were getting queries from customers. We would engage with the customers, and we rapidly realized under the old style of demo platforms that we had a major problem, because we would go visit a customer, we would say, here's how great we are, here's the scope of what our portfolio is capable of, let's talk about how we are doing our own DevOps transformation. They would say, great, that sounds fantastic, show me an example of what that looks like. And when I was in pre-sales, I would then say no and leave, because I had no ability to actually demonstrate any of that in a demo environment. It just didn't exist. So to support that and address this velocity crisis at the same time, it was interesting that the only solution that presented itself as being anywhere even remotely close to viable was containerization. It was the use of Docker. There was really no other platform or architecture out there that we identified that could actually address or solve any of the problems that we were facing about persisting my own data and an application environment changes, my own configurations, yet still getting updated versions of the software itself. And we changed completely to a container-based architecture for all of our server implementations. We still have a bunch of Windows-only client-side products. Those are great. They need to go on a Windows server, but that's the client stuff. That still kind of operates on an older model. But the servers, I can't reship an 80 gigabyte virtual machine to the pre-sales community every other week because one product had one release inside of it. We have to find a mechanism to do that. The use of Docker provides this framework, the ability to push an image to Docker Hub and then to consume that image and generate containers. And the way we packaged it is those containers are pre-built, pre-integrated, have all their data embedded in it. It's a preset demo environment ready to go for us to immediately execute. This had a huge number of spin-off benefits. First, most notably around performance and memory usage. Our platforms had to get much bigger, but the footprint that they consumed actually went down under this new architecture. Containerization, again, is just much more efficient than just pure virtual machines. It also let us take these images that we have constructed and leverage them as POC appliances or a proof of concept. When many of our customers would like to experiment with our software and kick the tires before they decide to make a significant purchase, great, here is an easy way to set up and configure these environments on site at a customer, basically eliminating any installation dependencies. We don't have to interface with their DBAs because we'll pack that into a container as part of our application. It was also a delightfully meta or meme-worthy transformation as well. Essentially, we implemented a DevOps pipeline to build a demo environment to demonstrate what a DevOps pipeline would look like. So it's this wonderful cyclical relationship between the two things that really provided a very compelling story to be able to tell to our customers. And for the most part, when we would go in, we would have this ability to now say, look, here I am acting as a developer. I'm going to make a code change. I'm going to commit that. You can see that my pipeline is beginning to execute. All of these other steps that you have in the pipeline, including executing testing and all the other things that you would need to do, all of that happens, and we collect seamlessly all of that information. You can see the change that I just made to the source code propagated into the application itself. It's a very compelling experience for a lot of customers who had never seen what DevOps might actually look like. So it was very, very successful. But that wasn't the only thing that needed to change. The marketing teams had to adapt as well. And more than anything, they needed an integrated environment that they could leverage to validate use cases and build brochures and collateral. So they actually began to consume our demo platform based off of this to use it to create those assets. And there were some, again, unanticipated but deeply valuable benefits that came out of that. One of the first ones was alignment. When we were building demo assets, just for the pre-sales use case, because marketing's using that same platform, we're getting product brochures and website screenshots and things like that that often are identical to screens you will be able to find in our live product demos. So if we were to go out and showcase to a customer, this is what we've got and here it is and it's great and it's a wonderful tool, they would have said, I've seen that exact screen in your brochure, in your website. It provided a continuity of experience that was really valuable to be able to get. It also allowed them, the marketing team, to define these are the marketing campaigns that we want to run. And if those capabilities were missing from our demo environment, we could then improve our demo environment. It gave us an entirely new channel of enhancement requests and ideas on how to deliver more compelling, more valuable customer presentations. We got a lot of spin-off benefits from that. And the communication side of it, the marketing and pre-sales team are significantly more aligned today. We allow for greater feedback back and forth in terms of the content and collateral we receive from marketing and what they need from our demo platform. But also, even at the events level, they can now take advantage of the fact that this platform is so modular and deployable to do things like hands-on workshops as part of a marketing event, capabilities we've just never had in the past. So there's been a lot of spin-off benefits from that one as well. And when we talk about the technical enablement teams, they've really had to shift and adapt to what we're calling continuous enablement. It has to be continuous. There's such a quantity and volume of changes arriving that they had to really increase their own velocity in alignment with the R&D organization. So the major changes involved getting the release enablement with R&D to ensure that we were getting the enablement content on what was in the release prior to when the release was actually out the door. This had to be a pretty big change. We couldn't wait 2 to 3 weeks after a release. In some cases, we would only be getting enablement on the current version a week before the next version arrived. That wasn't feasible or tenable in any way. The other changes, ironically, started to come back up into the R&D teams. And this is one of these key concepts that we see with a lot of DevOps transformations, is this idea of a feedback loop of different teams downstream reporting feedback into the upstream consumers. Most of the time, this conversation is around the context of operations and product enhancements and incidents. But in this case, it was also, look, we need to change how we do enablement. We needed to really get the R&D teams to begin to understand how they needed to change their own DevOps practices based on our downstream DevOps transformation that was caused, ironically, by their upstream DevOps transformation. So this is, again, part of what I mean by this being such a delightfully meme-worthy conversation about us building a DevOps platform to showcase DevOps. Additionally, the concept of kind of large-scale bootcamp trainings had to be heavily modified. Technical training being continuously available for pre-sales and any other consumers had to be on demand and had to be kept constantly up to date. And repurposing boot camps then became much more focused on dedicated things that were really targeted at stuff you could do only in a group setting, like kind of team training, presentation skills training, things like that. The technical stuff was all had to shift, how we deliver that content and the way that we're going to consume it, and it all changed dramatically and for the better. Things have gotten much, much better in terms of kind of the content, velocity, and delivery that we've been going through on this front. So what benefits did we really reap? First of all, communication. I mean, there's the obvious ones between technical enablement and the pre-sales teams. We communicate on a daily or near daily basis. We leverage our own technology platforms now. So we have built, among other things, our own agile backlog of enhancements that we need to track and manage to make changes to our demo environment. As we determine there are issues and how things are configured, we track those incidents as well. We're really starting to transform into an agile team and treating our demo platform like a software product and building out, release gates and quality gates and smoke tests and all of these different real world things that need to happen for a real world product. We're starting to actually treat things like a demo system like that. We're starting to see continued evolution in our relationships with how we keep pace with the R&D teams and how the R&D teams need to interact with us. They're much more open to communication. We keep having a lot of conversations about, yes, we built our demo platform this way. We would like you to build it for us. And they're now very open to those conversations. There's a context of how are we going to include this in the pipeline. Likewise, the marketing teams are communicating more with pre-sales and with the tech enablement teams, and this allows us to participate more and help us drive more compelling marketing events like these hands-on structured labs and workshops, which in turn rely on our demo platform, which in turn was all driven out of our DevOps transformation. The second major win that we got was around automation. The automation exercise in building out the demo environment has yielded fantastic results. Including that greater alignment and communication with R&D, but also dramatic increases in reliability and capability and a vastly increased velocity. Because we switched to containerization, essentially we have Docker files for our software products, everything we need to install. This gives us a very repeatable process for us to say, okay, there's been a new software release. I swap out the version of the bits and rerun the Docker image, and I get the Docker file, and I get a new image out of the Docker build process ready to go, because our Docker build process has all of the steps that we need to pre-configure the environment for our demo platforms. And we can control all of these variables and make it do exactly what we need. Then, within hours of that new software release becoming available, we have Docker images available that have been pushed to Docker Hub, and the pre-sales teams can go out and pull those images and instantiate new versions of the containers. And they can do that on an individual container basis. So they upgrade the one product that has been modified, nothing else in the environment needs to change, and it just continues to work. And it allows that incremental update. That was a major aspect of what we were looking for. Because they're in Docker Hub, they can also be leveraged multiple ways, independently of the demo systems. We built this using, for example, only Microfocus and open source software. So we are able to provide this to our partner communities, allow our partners to be able to consume and distribute this. This not only provided a massive dose of goodwill from a Microfocus side, but it also provides a level of consistency between what the Microfocus internal teams like myself are going out and saying to our mutual customers and what our partners are now capable of showing and discussing with our mutual customers. It also eliminated some of the need that our partners would have to maintain their own lab environments. A lot of our partner community would get our software and have to stand up their own environments. We didn't offer this. Now that we are, they are rapidly finding that they can repurpose these resources that they hired to simply maintain software installations and apply patches as we release them by shifting that onus back to us. If we're providing updated versions of our software in a very automated, consistent, and timely fashion, they don't need to invest those cycles and they can actually become more efficient. And then the third major alignment is really at a very high level at the Microfocus strategy. So Microfocus is driving 4 key focus areas. One of those is around enterprise DevOps. And we're able to be not only in complete alignment with this concept of enterprise DevOps, not only just the pure mechanics of how do you do development and do continuous integration, but including more esoteric concepts like continuous assessment, the feedback loops that are coming from production, continuous operations, security and continuous security as part of a DevOps lifecycle. All of these are available now in our demo platform. And we're not just supporting this corporate message, but we are tangible proof that it's actually a really good platform and really good exercise for everybody to undertake as they go through this. Finally, DevOps is a journey, not a destination. We are by no means done. There's so many more things that we could do. In terms of automation, today the virtual machines themselves, while they contain a lot of containers, those are not necessarily constructed in a completely automated fashion. We want to ensure that we have a rigorous build process so that from all of the artifacts that we maintain in our source code repositories, that we could regenerate the entire demo environment entirely from scratch. This is a goal that we have, and we're continuing to work towards that. We want to change the architectures to be much more dynamic. We want to provide this concept around things like idempotence, and automated provisioning to give people a platform and say, run this script and it will update your environment for you without forcing you to re-download an entire virtual machine, to really start to change and provide that incremental change benefit into a virtual machine architecture. We want to coordinate more with R&D and do pipeline consolidation. We have our own pipelines for generating demo assets. They have their own pipelines for generating the actual enterprise software packages. We want to merge those together, and as part of the R&D process, to automatically have them generate all of the demo content and collateral that we require to actually go out and showcase all of this information. Proper integration strategies and data management. These are issues that we continue to face and deal with. If we're replacing a container, what data elements are we potentially losing? Are we hamstringing people by forcing them to volume mount their data? What impact does that have on a demo system? These work very differently than production systems. So there's a lot of change in the wind about how we're going to centrally manage data and how we're going to approach this, and many, many other challenges. There's so much work to do. It's very exciting. There's so many more things that we can actually cover off as we go through this entire journey and continue down this path. And then finally, to learn more about Microfocus, absolutely, please feel free to visit our website. You can just Google for these things, but if you have any constraints on your current tooling and you have an interest in how we can help you gain more value out of your existing software investments, this is very much our strategy, including any open source tooling that you put in place. That's great. And if you do need guidance on a services side of what a DevOps transformation would look like or anything along those lines, I am happy to talk. If you want to email me, by all means, feel free. And at this point, we will look and see if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to have?
Yeah, so we have gotten one or two in so far, but there's plenty of time for questions for Bryan. If you do have one, just go to your webinar control panel and submit your question there in the question tab. So the first one is, how were your marketing and technical enablement OpEx or budgets impacted through this process? Did they go up or down?
Oh, it's a really good question. In a lot of ways, the budgeting side of it has been unaffected so far. They haven't changed at all, which is a source of great angst and frustration to a lot of the downstream consumers like myself. I'm crying out for more resources all the time, but the realization is sinking in, and this is following the same process. It's starting more upstream and is trickling down throughout the organization as they begin to realize when you dramatically expand the scope of enterprise capability in your demo environments, you might need bigger laptops to be able to run those environments. It's enterprise software. There's only so many shortcuts we can take and only so much benefit solutions like Docker provide before inevitably you hit the hard physics of, I just don't have enough memory to run all these things at the same time.
Okay, great. So I have a question for you while we're waiting to see if we get any more from the audience. How long ago did you guys start this transformation? You mentioned a couple of years, but
yeah. So the transformation from the pre-sales and technical enablement sides, really the warning bells started going off in 2016. And that's when we began doing the research and assembling the initial prototype for our Docker-based demo platforms. Initially, it was a prototype. It was an interesting idea, but then it rapidly turned into a necessity as we began to realize the benefits. There were a bunch of different targeted goals that we had. We accomplished all of those goals, which was strange. It was probably the most successful project that we've ever interacted with at Microfocus. And it took us approximately kind of 8 months of basically me going heads down and building the whole thing out. It was not as technically complex as I thought it would be to assemble all of this stuff together. With an actual team of people who actually knew what Docker was and how it worked, because I was coming in as a complete novice. I tell a humorous story how I wasted 2 days of my life before I finally figured out that Docker run and Docker start are different things. So utter ground zero to a fully fledged platform took about 8 months for me to accomplish. And the platform has continued to evolve dramatically from there. So we are constantly adding its technical depth behind the scenes based on the excellent work of my technical enablement teams that I've been working with the whole time.
Great. All right. And I'm sure that you guys are by no means considered done with your DevOps transformation.
Oh goodness, no. There's dozens and dozens of things, even just at the pre-sales and technical enablement level, that we want to continue to march down that path on. Yes, many changes. The R&D organization is constantly enhancing their own processes in internal metrics and mechanics. They're basically throttling themselves at this point. The message from our customer base is, again, please stop. So the only reason we're releasing quarterly for most of our products and monthly for some of the software as a service-based products is because we've literally been told, don't go any faster than that. We can't keep up. It's annoying every time we sign into your SaaS portal to see a pop-up saying, what's new in this version of the software because it's been updated. We can't keep up. We can't do that enablement training. If you wanted daily releases, I think we're there. I just don't think our customer base would be thrilled with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Great. So we've gotten a couple more questions, and here's another one. Hi, Brian. Great to hear from you again. This is from Stephen. Do you see a different set of challenges when the solution is SaaS-based or versus on-premises?
Yes, there are a totally separate set of challenges that face each one of those. From a SaaS perspective, we could go as fast as we want, pushing updates. You know, we could give you one every week, for example. And the feedback was really very strongly, we don't have time to consume that. It's great that you're updating the software. Go ahead and do that, but do it in a way that allows us to ignore those changes and continue working the way that we've been working in the past. This is a kind of a key driver that we see happening all the time out there. We have a lot of customers that take advantage of some features in our products, and those are the features they're deriving value from. The software solution might have all this other capability and they're not consuming any of it, and that's fine. We don't want to hamstring any of our customers by saying, if you're going to take advantage of this part of the application, now you must use this new feature in order to do so. That would be devastating to our customer base. And that's a major takeaway from software in general, but on the SaaS space in particular, where customers are often not given the choice about whether to upgrade or not. You know, we have modern web architecture design. When the upgrade rolls in, it rolls in for everybody. That in particular needs to be thought through from a software as a service perspective. For on-premises deployments, customers have that agency and choice. So they can choose not to deploy versions of our software if they're simply not at a point where they could consume it yet, and give them much more flexibility in terms of how and when they're going to actually put that in place. It's a very different dynamic, and we need to focus a lot more on those software as a service only offerings to make sure that we don't disrupt our customers by doing things too quickly.
All right, great. We have gotten a few more questions in, but there's time. If you have a question for Brian, please don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we'll just keep plugging along here as long as you've got them. Okay, next question. Sometimes large corporations get guidance on DevOps from trends and hype. What would you say to the senior VPs of large enterprise companies in respect to how to build their DevOps roadmap to ensure the staff are not set up to fail?
So this is a really big question, and it's a little difficult to address because, you know, to quote Monty Python, we're all individuals. The major context behind this is, yes, there is a ton of DevOps trend and hype and buzzword bingo that occurs out there in the industry today. There are a couple of key things that we like to do from a Microfocus perspective. The first one is really the message that most organizations, especially larger corporations, often own somewhere between 90% and 100% of all of the software assets they need to begin a DevOps transformation. It's really not about technology. It's not about buying a DevOps tool. I would submit if anybody says, we have a DevOps tool and we'd like to sell it to you, is probably misleading you about what their tool actually does. DevOps is a much bigger process and cultural shift about how you consume technology than it is an actual technology platform itself. Most of the time when people say that, they're actually talking about continuous deployment and continuous delivery tools, but that's a different conversation as well. The major things to think about in terms of ensuring the staff is not set up to fail is really getting the cultural idea in their head. Some of the bigger problems that I face talking to customers for the first time about a DevOps transformation and increasing the velocity, going from a quarterly release cadence to monthly, then down to weekly, is a perception gap that many people are facing. They're thinking in their head, oh my gosh, their quarterly release is these 228 features. We have this big release window and it takes all weekend to deploy. You want to do that every month? You want to then go every week? I'm going to have to spend every weekend in here doing that? Not at all. Part of the shift, press the time frame down, much smaller companies, very, very few of these that do deployment that takes place. And you hear the metric, Amazon is deploying alternately everywhere from once every 6 seconds to once every 2 seconds, sort of depends on who's quoting what metric. I'm sure only Amazon actually knows for sure. Those are the scope of the changes that they're making. Additionally, automation is the key part of this. Really, the major focus for a successful DevOps transformation is identifying where are you injecting manual steps into what should be an automated process. Because not everything should be automated. You should still have quality gates that a human operator should be putting eyes on to validate, yes, this does adhere to our standards, especially if you're in a regulatory compliance-based organization. But you really want to start to focus on, are you doing things that are hard to replicate, that rely on a human being coming in and doing the right thing in the right way at the right time? Those steps are fraught with peril, and we keep seeing examples of this. To again use Amazon as an example, what was it, a year and a half ago, somebody accidentally brought down S3 storage and about a third of the internet broke because they took that offline by mistake. That's not something that humans necessarily should be doing. That's the point of automation. And automation, if it makes that mistake, you correct the script and rerun it. You don't go in and just make the change and get it working again. This consistency is the key aspect to a successful DevOps transformation. This is the thought leadership and the mind share that you need to try and drill into people's cultural identity at the organization, that this is to automate away the annoying, tedious tasks that you might accidentally do incorrectly to free you up to do the interesting and fun parts of your job. Really, that message resonates extremely well with customers, and that's how we position this.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, great. So let's see. I'm going to give the audience a few more minutes to submit any final questions that we have. But while we're waiting, I figured I'll go ahead and do the gift card winner drawing, and then we'll see where we are after that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do our drawing for our 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Benny Yee. Congratulations, Benny. Our second winner is Martin Sirkin. Congratulations, Martin, sorry. And then our final winner is Josephine Boyo. Congratulations, Josephine. Congratulations to all 3 of you. Looks like we may have one more question here. Let's see, 1 or 2 more questions. No, it looks like that is all the questions that we have, but we'll keep it open for a minute or 2 longer. And while we are waiting again, please know that if you missed any or all of the event today, we will be we are recording the webinar, so we will be putting it up on the DevOps.com website. That you can access it on demand right there on the DevOps.com website. Just go to DevOps.com/website. It should be waiting for you right there in the on-demand section. We are going to be sending out a link also by email that you can access the webinar on demand. Let's see. It looks as though we are done with the questions. So Bryan, we're going to go ahead and close it out a couple minutes early, give everybody 15 minutes back in their day. Hope you don't mind.
Nope, not at all. I hope everybody enjoyed.
All right, great. Yes, I do want to thank you, Bryan, for giving such a great presentation. And I do want to thank the audience also for joining and being a part of today's webinar. And so I hope everybody has a great day. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off.